So we have a special event today again. We've going to talk about the tell me about yourself question. Basically the way every single interview starts, and in my opinion, where some interviews are made or destroyed or ruined. If you can get this question right, it really puts you off on a really good note. But we're also joined by a recruiter who works specifically in the technology industry, who hires tons of software engineers every single year, and is going to share a bit of advice about how to approach recruiting for software engineers early in your career, especially later in your career as well. So please give a nice muted round of applause to Danielle Fuppy, joining us from Business Centric Technology. Danielle, thank you very much for joining.
My pleasure. And so nice to meet everybody. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have you because you really focus in on the group that we have here today, which is how do you get engineers hired at all levels. Give me a quick background about you and BCT, and the kind of work you guys do, and then we'll talk about specific tips you would give to new engineers who are going through the interview process.
Sure. My pleasure. And thank you for having me. So obviously, my name is Danielle Fuppy. I'm the recruitment manager here at Business Centric Technology. I've been in this role for a little over 4 years, and our firm specializes purely in placing technology talent. And I've been in agency recruiting combined for a little over 12 years. It's been so long, I'm kind of losing track of all the years and they're blurring together a little bit. But that's a little bit about my background. And I love what I do. I love helping, good people connect with other good people. And it's really a win-win situation, right? When you get to help a candidate find a great job and you get to help a client fill a void and find someone great to add to their already amazing team.
Yeah. When you are looking at software engineers, a bunch come your way because you have a lot of open roles. What are some of the questions you ask engineers before you decide, yep, I'm ready to move you along to the client? Because remember, the recruiters act as sort of a gate and they move along the best clients because they want to put they want to look good in front of their own clients, the companies that's going to be hiring you. So they want to look for a really great candidate. So Dan, what are some things when your conversations with candidates, what are you asking them to figure out if they're a fit?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I'm looking for is, do I think that this person's going to be a good culture fit for my end client, right? Whatever that is. Is this a client-facing development type role? Is this kind of more of someone who wouldn't be interacting with an end client or an end customer? I'm looking for passion as well. I want to understand, perhaps why this software developer, why did they want to get into technology, and when did they really get into it? And oftentimes I find that it's usually one of those things that the candidate has always been interested in technology. They got into it at an early age. They kind of started tinkering with stuff and teaching themselves, coding languages or scripting. But I'm really looking for a passion. And I'm looking to find out more about side projects they're doing. Almost every developer I talk to seems to have something that they're coding, and whether it's a mobile app or what have you. But I want to learn about what's that project. What technologies are you using? Why did you pick those specific technologies? And I'm looking to also figure out, is your strength and interest perhaps more on the front end, or is it back end? Because I usually find that developers have a preference for one or the other. So those are some of the questions I would say I probably start with in an initial conversation.
I like that a lot. I think we're actually going to talk a lot about passion today when we talk about the tell me about yourself answer, because I think that really needs to come out, especially if you're switching into software development,
Mhm.
right? What got you excited about that in the first place? Why are you switching in? Why are you changing careers into this world is super, super important. When people are preparing for interviews, Danielle, how do you advise people who have an interview coming up to do prep? A lot of people haven't interviewed for a long time, or they've interviewed plenty, but this is their first time interviewing in the technology industry. How do you advise your candidates that you work with to prepare for an interview? Should they be practicing answers, thinking about stories, researching in certain places? What do you think the best candidate prep's like?
That's a really good question. I think that I would say there's a lot of do's and don'ts of interviewing, and interviewing is really, it's a learned skill, and it really does take practice. So the more you do it, the better that you get. But I would, just try to study up on the company that you're interviewing with first and foremost. It's really important that you have a good feel for, what they do, and what if it's a software company, what is the software? Who are they selling it to? Try to find out, maybe by doing some research on LinkedIn, what does their tech stack look like? And try to get yourself on a different playing field versus another candidate who might just wing that interview. I try to also understand and tie in, if the company has a mission statement, or it looks like, they have certain values and things like that. I would try to, see if those align with you as a candidate and your personal beliefs, and organically bring that into your interview somehow. I would also say have really good questions. There's a dating period, right, before someone gets married, and it's no different career wise. That dating period, you want to let the client really drive the questions initially, and probably the first interview. And you don't want to ask things like, okay, the first question you ask the hiring manager is this remote? How much does it pay? Or how much vacation time does it come with? We all want to make the most money as possible. We all want, generous vacation time, but save those questions for a little later on in the interview process, because the client's really trying to figure out if you're a fit or not. And so I would say, again, do your company research, try to figure out what the tech stack is, how your values align. Those would be just a few of the things, Adriel, that come to my mind immediately.
Yeah, I want to add 2 points there about research, because is or the way you put it about differentiating yourself. So one specific bit of advice that's worked really well for me: you always want to be trying to connect with people at the company, for two reasons. One is so you can learn about what they're doing and learn about the culture, but two is so you can say you connected with people at the company. It sounds really good when you went out of your way to connect with people at the company. However, pro tip here, it can be hard to get people who are actively at the company to talk to you if you tell them that you're recruiting, because maybe they have a policy that says not to do it. Maybe they're worried about getting in trouble. Who knows what, right? They don't want to get involved in the recruiting system, anything like that. But people who are very willing to talk about the company are people who recently left the company. So if you can browse on LinkedIn and find somebody who left whatever company you're interviewing for in the last 6 months, and send them a message: hey, I'm interviewing for your old company. I just want to get a sense for the culture, understand why you left, understand the business. They are much more likely to connect with you. So one little specific tip there. The second thing, I want to really highlight what Danielle said, and it's something we've talked a lot about this week. Assume everyone you're competing against for the role is a good engineer. Just assume it. Don't assume you're necessarily a better engineer, or you're necessarily know how to build certain things, but just assume everyone else, assume even more, assume they're a better engineer than you, right? Respect your competition. So how are you going to stand out? It's what Danielle said. It's what do you know about the business? What do you understand about the clients? What do you understand about the mission statement, and why do you connect to it better, right? If I'm competing against Amy and Manuela and they are better engineers than me, but I say, I care so much about your mission, and I learned what it is, and I spoke to somebody about it. And by the way, I'm working on this side project directly tied to what you do. I'll learn the engineering stuff. I'm hired, right? Like, I care a lot more. What do you think about that, Danielle?
I think that's all really, really good information. I think, just as an example, I would mention, one of the reasons that I took this job 4 years ago is BCT is a female minority owned company. And I loved that about the company. I really felt synergy, and thought, I'd really like to help our CEO. Her name's Barbie Barda, do something fantastic and take a company that, was struggling 5 years ago to an Inc. 5000 company today. And so those are the things I'm talking about. Or, another cause that's really close to my heart is cancer. Both my parents had cancer. And so, Susan G. Komen, cancer centers, I have a really, really strong passion for that. And so look for organizations in your job search that you really want to stand behind and are passionate about, whether it's personally or technology or whatever.
Yeah. Nuts and bolts question, but again, many people here might be going through their first series of software engineering interviews. I know we have people who have been other kinds of engineers and
Mhm.
maybe even people who have been in the tech world before, but in other disciplines. What is what does software engineer cycle look like? When do behavioral interviews come in? When do technical interviews come in? What is the balance? Just like 101, but if somebody applies for a technical role, what might they expect throughout the entire cycle interviewing with that company?
Well, do you mean if it's working with an agency, or do you mean if it's a direct, hey, I sent my resume directly?
Let's say working with the agency because that's most relevant to you.
Okay. So let's say we have a position posted and you send your resume to BCT. One of my recruiters or myself might look at that resume. And if we like what we see, on paper, we would reach out with kind of you could call it kind of a discovery call, just to try and get a feel for the what, when, why, hows of your background. Who are you as a developer, and what have you been working with from a tech standpoint, and what's going to kind of be your parameters for finding a position, meaning location, compensation, what type of company you might want to work for, and then just kind of some of those basic like HR questions that we have to ask every single candidate. What's your work status, meaning are you a U.S. citizen, that kind of a thing. And then if that initial conversation discovery call goes well, then we would go ahead and set up a virtual meeting like this. We want to meet you. We want to make sure, you don't have like two heads or anything like that, and that you look presentable to send over to one of our end clients, right? That we have a relationship with. And so during the face-to-face, we would talk a little bit more about your background and some of the projects that you've worked on, and hone in on any additional questions we might have for you. We likely would also set up what we call a Derico assessment. Derico is a third-party company that we use and we've used for years, that does technical assessments. I can't read code. I understand at a high level what a developer does and things like that. And I'll look at your GitHub page and ask questions. But we utilize Derico because the person that does the technical screening is also a developer. They're coding, they understand the day to day. And we're only technical to a certain extent. And our knowledge is very broad over a lot of different technology positions, not just software development. So if the Derico results come back favorable, then we would start marketing your resume or submit your resume over to our customer. I think one of the things I would say is, if you're working with any agency recruiter and they have something similar, like a technical assessment, ask them to see your results, because you'll learn a lot from that. Where did you answer well, and what area you might want to maybe improve upon, or do a little bit more homework, or just give it some better thought dialogue in a future interview, how you want to articulate that technology. And I think you'll learn a lot from those. And then again, if it's favorable, we would submit your resume over to our client, and they're kind of going to do something similar, right? They're going to have an initial conversation. If that goes well and there's chemistry there, then they'll probably set up a virtual interview. We don't have a lot of clients that are totally on site yet, with COVID. So everything is, for the most part, still virtual.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. Last question for you. And if other people have questions for Danielle, drop them in the chat. If you don't want your name associated, you could send them directly to me and I'll ask the question. But my last question for you, Danielle, today we're going to be talking about the question, tell me about yourself, and giving a few tips about how to answer that. What would be your advice in a minute or two maybe either the best thing that somebody can do in the tell me about yourself question, or just one mistake to avoid? What is one tip you would give as we start talking about the tell me about yourself question?
I think I would say keep your answers short, sweet, and to the point. You don't want to go off on a tangent for 15 minutes if your interview slot is only 30 minutes. But I would say a little bit about you personally, and I would say a little bit about you professionally, or where you want to go professionally. So if that were me, I would say something like, well, I'm married and I love to travel, and I've been in technology or interested in technology for X amount of years, and I just really love you know Python. It's something that I've just been kind of tinkering with for 5 years now, and I'm really trying to get my foot in the door to somewhere where I can find someone that can teach me the ropes and kind of take the existing foundation that I have to another level. So again, a little personal, a little professional, but short and sweet, and anything that you can kind of tie organically from the company and your background, whether it's a similar technology, a similar passion, a similar mission statement, you want to try and tie that into that introduction.
Awesome. Anytime I ask someone else for their advice, I'm like, oh, I hope you say something I agree with. Otherwise, I'm in trouble for the rest of my presentation. Thank you. I totally agree with that. I'm not in trouble for the rest of my presentation. Danielle, thank you so much for joining. Can you please drop into the chat the best way to connect with you, with BCT and the roles you guys have? And I encourage all of you and anybody watching this, connect with Danielle, whether it's for your next role or a role a few years later. Recruiters are there to make you guys successful. That's their entire business. They're there to find people like you and place people like you. So if you can connect with Danielle now, she'll either help you out for your next job or help you out down the line. And just making that connection on LinkedIn at the very least is a start. Shooting her a note and saying, thank you so much for speaking today. Really enjoyed learning about you. Even if you don't have a role for me yet, would be an amazing thing as well, right? Be top of mind for her. Take the 30 seconds it'll take you to click connect on her name and then send her a personal message about thanking her for joining us, and it'll pay dividends. Danielle, thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining.
Adriel, it was a pleasure. Nice to meet everybody. I hope you all have a great Friday and weekend.
All right. All right, folks. So let's talk about the tell me about yourself question. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, I saw somebody posted a question for Danielle. Any advice for preparing for a Derico assessment? What I'll do is I will send her that question. Sharad, very fair question. I'll send her that question. I'll try to get you an answer. Sorry, she dropped off. So we're going to talk about the tell me about yourself question. But before we do, let's talk about some tips as I was watching yesterday's videos. So the first is, a lot of you are telling stories that have nothing to do with engineering, which is totally fair. Many of you come from backgrounds that have nothing to do with engineering. But if you're telling those stories, remember what Danielle said and what Christian said on Wednesday, soft skills are really important. Tie it together for me. If you're going to tell me a story, I listened to someone tell me a great story about how they managed the brewery, and that was a really complex process. It was a really good story, and he told it well, and it was complex and all that stuff, but tie it together for me. Don't make me connect the dots for me and say, and my experience with this brewery or whatever is going to make me a great software engineer because of this, that, and the other thing. And actually, as I've been coding over the last 3 months, I find many of those skills relate, right? Connect the dots for me if you're going to tell me a story that's not super obvious. And the second thing, use numbers. Use numbers where you can. Numbers are super helpful. They add context to the story. Tell me how much of something, how quickly did you do something, how many of whatever did you put together. Just saying words like a lot or quickly or really well doesn't tell me anything. If you can give me numbers, they don't have to be massive numbers. You don't all have to have, closed deals worth $100 million and saved your company $50 billion with a profit. Even if it's for a couple of $100 and you're proud of it, or a couple $1,000 and you really came together to do it, share numbers. It gives me a real understanding of the story. So when you're practicing your answers where possible, make it relevant to engineering, and then use numbers. So let's talk about the tell me about yourself question. So first things first, why are they asking you this question? Well, I think there's a few reasons. The first is one you might not expect, which is I know you're nervous for this interview and you spent a ton of time preparing, but the other people might not have a playbook either. The person interviewing you might not know exactly what they're doing. They didn't necessarily get training. They don't know exactly how to do an interview. Maybe there's some early in their career who's just never done an interview before. So make this easy for them, right? Tell me about yourself helps them get started. So our job is to make it fun and easy for them in the beginning of the interview and make sure they're not worried. Because we're not nervous. You shouldn't be nervous either, Mr. or Mrs. Interviewer. Next is who are you, right? Pretty basic, but more than just who are you, who is Sharad or who is Manuela, is do I want to work alongside you, right? Do you have the personality, the background, the hustle, the culture fit that makes me say, ooh, yeah, well, that's somebody who I really want to work next to. Next is, are you a fit for the role, right? We've been talking about that all week long, and that's what we always talk about, is can you tie yourself directly to this role? So again, for engineering, if you spent your entire career in hospitality and you just started learning code 6 weeks ago, that's fine because it's true and there's no way around it. But make sure you talk about your love of engineering, how hard you've been working, a side project you've been doing. Don't spend all of your time talking about things unrelated. Make sure you're a fit for the role. And lastly, and I think this is the most important one, what brought you here today in front of this particular company? If you can explain what brought you to this role and what excites you about this role right now in your career in the tell me about yourself question, you're going to do really well. So a few things to keep in mind here. First, it's your first impression. I want you to own it. I want you to have this answer down pat, and I want you to customize it for every different interview and even the people you're interviewing with. For example, I actually have a client who interviewed with someone. I was working with her trying to figure out the best way to answer, tell me about yourself. And we found out that the person that she's interviewing with went through NOLS, the National Outdoor Leadership Service. This person loved the outdoors. I said to my client, I go, Sally, this is amazing. You love the outdoors. Make sure you mention that you've worked for an outdoor startup. It's subtle, but it's customized. Own it. Next, just like Danielle told us a moment ago, keep it brief. Don't share absolutely everything here. This is not a resume run through. Make sure to bring in a little bit of relevancy where possible. It's so important to say, this is who I am, and this is why I matter to you and to this role. And lastly, I want you to show passion. The passion here is what's going to really come across, especially for those of you who are making big career pivots for the first time. So let's go through those. It's your first impression, right? This is a very scientific graph that I made up. And it basically shows the following. You got the start of your interview on the left and the end of it on the right. If you start off your interview on a good note, or someone's like, ooh, I like the way Amy answered that. Well, then the rest of your interview, even if you go downhill for most of it and the rest of your answers are kind of meh, well, you're just going downhill from a high point and you might still end in a good position. However, if your tell me about yourself answer on the start of your interview is like, kind of all right, and you fumble it or you talk too long or you bore them or it's irrelevant, the rest of your interview could be amazing. You could only have good answers, but you might not make it back to base. So starting off really strong is really, really important. Next, keep it brief, but not that brief. For anybody who's a fan of the Avengers series, you've probably seen Groot. The only thing this person, this tree man can say is, I am Groot. You want it to be a little bit longer than that, a little bit longer than this is my name, but still learn a little bit from Groot. Don't ramble, keep it to 60 or 90 seconds. Share a little bit more than just what you currently do, because you are a little bit more than what you currently do. But this is just an overarching picture. Maybe share a big win, a big accomplishment, but it's the high level. And this is where most people make their biggest mistake. The tell me about yourself answer is not a resume run through. If you guys know this movie with Sean William Scott and Ashton Kutcher, I'd be very impressed. So drop it in the chat, first of all, because I'm curious who was a bum in the 90s like I was. But you might remember this scene where Ashton is ordering Chinese food and he's saying, well, I want the orange chicken, and then I want the rice, and then I want the egg rolls, and then I want whatever, right? You do not want to be sharing everything you've ever done and in a long-winded manner. You don't want to be sharing everything that's ever happened to you. There you go, Sherrod and Jack. Sherrod and Jack. Dude, where's my car? Hilarious movie. Maybe I don't recommend watching it, but it used to be hilarious for sure. Point is, it's not a resume run through. This is not the place where you share everything you've ever done. And this is what most people do in this answer. And this is where most people really drop the ball. They said, well, I went to college here. And when I graduated, I did this for a year. And that took me to this company where it was for 3 years and I got promoted. And then I did that and that and that. And then 8 minutes later, we finally get to today's moment. The interviewer doesn't care about you. They don't care. They don't want to hear everything you've accomplished. They don't want to hear the life story. They came to learn what you're going to do for them. They came to learn why you're a fit for the role. So work hard to make sure in your tell me about yourself answer, you're really customizing it to the role. So don't tell me just everything you've ever done. Tell me what those things have turned you into. What is your brand? What are you excellent at? What do you love? Why are you here? Not just what you did and when you did it, but who you are and why you've done what you've done. This is the biggest mistake anybody makes. So work really hard to avoid the urge to say, did this, did this, did this, did this, did this, did this. Give that overarching picture. You'll get into the details later. Later, someone might ask you, can you walk me through your resume? That is a resume run through. Tell me about yourself is a lot more than that. Next is make it relevant. And you've seen this exact image before if you've been following us along for the week, because I want you to recognize who you are. You are the black sheep here. You are different than many other candidates. You have a background that's maybe not in tech at all, and that's probably not in software engineering. You are very different than the regular candidate, and I want you to acknowledge that and look in the mirror and admit it. Because if you can say, I'm a black sheep, and everyone else is looking for white sheep because they're pattern matching and finding the people who are most similar, then you can say, all right, how am I gonna stand out? What is gonna make me special? Well, the answer there is relevancy. If you are different, because your background is different, your degree is different, your age is different, whatever, if you are different, then share where you are similar. Share where you are relevant. Say, hey, I understand that I'm different, but I actually saw that on the job description. This is really important, and I've done exactly this in different roles. I've been a leader, or I've been a team player, or hey, I know that this is a bit different than the norm, but I love your mission, right? I love what you work on. I've been volunteering for a company that's very similar. Or, hey, I know I'm different, but I've spoken with 3 people within your company to understand the culture and the work, and I think I've got the skills and the abilities to handle it, right? Acknowledge your differences. Don't try to be like everyone else, because you are not like everyone else, but make yourselves relevant. Now, next and last, actually, I want you to show passion where authentic. This question is about passion. It's not about just what you've done. It's about what you love to do. So show that passion, right? Do you guys recognize this movie? This is, I actually showed this movie to my fiance's parents. They had never seen it. I was doing well with them before. I don't think that was probably a mistake on my end. But this is Zoolander. This is Ben Stiller playing the male model Zoolander, who was born to be a male model, right? If you've seen this movie, a journalist asks him, they say, Derek, when did you decide that you're going to be a male model? And Derek said, well, I was in 3rd grade and I was sitting in the lunchroom and I looked in the back of my spoon and I saw my reflection and I decided, wow, Derek, you are really, really, really ridiculously good looking. You should be a male model. Honestly, I wake up every morning and look at myself in the mirror and say that, but I think male modeling is out of fashion. Point is, what is your version of that? Right? What makes you want to be doing this? When did you look into the back of a spoon and decide you should be a software engineer? What is that passion that you have? Because that's what's going to help you stand out. So here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to quickly run through it if you haven't done this yet. Log into riveterworks.com. It's free. It always will be. Practice your answer and tell me about yourself. I'll show you where to find this. It's a little bit different than it was before. I want you to give feedback to at least one other video. It is so valuable, so important. For those of you who have been recording videos but not giving feedback, I know that giving feedback could be weird. I promise you it'll make you better. And I promise you it'll help others as well. So